Now available. Paperback and Kindle Unlimited. ISIS, the main event. It's carnage inside of a steel cage when the goddess next door steps in the squared circle with the beast from the boss in this action-packed all-new ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS, the main event, paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. Last week, DC Comics announced it was leaving Diamond Comics Distributors and signing on with another distributor. Now, while there are some in the comic book community that see this as a bad thing, I see this as a step forward towards healing a deeply damaged comic book industry. Now, Diamond Comics Distributors has had a monopoly over comic books in the United States for the last 25 years, and in that 25 years, things have not gotten better as related to the comic book industry. So DC Comics finally saw that things were not getting better and decided to do something in an effort to move itself forward. This decision to leave Diamond Comics Distributors, compounded with the recent firing of Dan Didio from DC Comics, shows a company that is looking to really get serious about getting back in the comic book publishing business and looking to become a lot more competitive. And that's one of the things that will benefit comic readers all across this country when DC signs with another distributor, is we're going to get competition on the distribution level. And competition is something that this industry desperately needs, because when there's competition on the distribution level, that means we're going to get better quality comics overall. Because in the current distribution system run by Diamond, we have comics stores who have to go out here and buy these comics, and there's no returnability. And I probably will guarantee you this as a publishing professional who's been around for over 20 years. If Warner Brothers is signing with a new distributor, there's probably going to be a returnability clause with this new deal. And there's probably going, if there are large big box retailers coming in, like Target and Walmart, we're probably definitely going to see that returnability clause, because these retailers won't even let you set up shelf space in their outlets without returnability. So this is a good thing coming to the comic book industry, DC signing on with a new distributor, because if these distributors are going to be going into these big box retailers and larger retailers, that means comics are coming back to retail. And DC Comics, if they're coming back to retail, that means these characters are getting more exposure. So this is, again, a long-term good thing, because now new readers are going to get access to these comics at the Walmarts and the Targets. They maybe start with the 100-pagers, but eventually, this may eventually, if it works out, lead to a return to comics on the rack. And it also may lead to an increase in quality, because if there is returnability at these retailers, then guess what? All of these so-called poor quality, woke SJW comics that are currently being produced right now, they are going to be vetted by the marketplace. And the marketplace is not going to put up with poor quality comics. And if there is returnability in place, then guess what? DC Comics is going to get a lot of those comics back as the retailers start sending them back, and comic shop owners won't have to take the brunt of all of these losses that have been putting comic shops out of business all across the country. Because with a new distributor and returnability, that means they can pack up all of these failed so-called woke titles or books that perform poorly, like your Brian Michael Bendis Superman and your Tom King Batman, pack them up in a box at the end of the month, send them back for store credit, and we get a real measure of what is actually selling and what is actually not selling. So with those measures of what is selling and not selling, DC Editorial is going to be forced to put out better quality comics overall, and titles that aren't performing well and titles that aren't selling, or creative teams that aren't selling well, these people are going to be out of a job because the marketplace is going to dictate what's going to sell. So we're going to see a complete change in the marketplace for the better with DC Comics going out here and bringing in a new distributor. And again, that competition from DC's distributor, this is going to help the overall marketplace long term, because DC is no longer going to be sitting there allowing people to continue producing poor quality comics that just sell to a comic shop, and these comic shops will have actual real numbers for sales and not have to rely on orders to say this book is selling. No, you will have an actual number that tells you what is actually selling, and the returns will tell you what is not selling. So this is going to help the business of comic shops in the long term, and it's going to help the overall industry long term, because when you have, like it is right now, the comic shops just order whatever books are given to them in the previews catalog, and sometimes you get the overshipping from Marvel where they try to push bad books off on these comic shops. They're really suffering because of this current policy by this monopoly. But with competition, that means we're going to see a leaner, stronger comic book industry, and many of these people who are so-called SJWs and these people who want to promote these woke comics, they are going to see the real impact of the real business marketplace, and they're going to see what sells and what doesn't sell. And with competition, companies like Marvel, who produce a lot of these so-called poor quality SJW books, they're going to be forced to step up, because in order to get into those other retailers like Walmart and Target and Barnes & Noble, like DC is taking their products to, you're going to have to increase the quality of your content. So the readers, at the end of the day, we're going to eventually start to see better quality books start trickling out of these comic book publishers, the big two, and other smaller comic publishers. They're going to have to step up their game, because with another distributor in the marketplace allowing them access to other shopping venues, that means they have to step things up. So we're going to see an increase in quality, an increase in standards, and finally we start to see DC Comics finally being run like a publishing house and not a personal playground. And I'm seeing from the sketches outside that we're seeing a stronger DC Comics starting to emerge, and I never thought I would see that, but we're starting to see a company finally starting to be run like a business. Because when you have them firing your Dan Didio and his dysfunctional editorial, and now this decision to leave Diamond Comics Distributors, we're starting to see that somebody at AT&T sees DC Comics as an asset, and they're making efforts to invest in your DC Comics. This compounded with the Superboy revelation in DC Comics. It's looking like another, again, slow step to giving us back the classic DC universe that we knew, and looks like the company is starting to make those slow steps towards getting this company back to what it was and back to producing the kind of content that readers all over the world loved and enjoyed. So it looks like a step in the right direction, and it's a step that I applaud. It looks like DC Comics is getting itself back together. I mean, I hope that they manage to get things back together, because this doesn't look like something Jim Lee would do. This looks something more like corporate coming in and trying to gain value on its economic asset and looking to get more new readers into DC Comics by changing things as related to distribution, because they understood Diamond just wasn't cutting it, and Diamond's distribution terms just weren't there. Now, there was an issue again that's related to Diamond not paying Warner Brothers, and I believe that's part of it too. But I see this as a step in the right direction because another distributor is competition. Competition makes people step up. Competition makes people want to do better, and competition will be the thing that weeds out a lot of the trash titles that are flooding comic book stores, because when you have a competing distributor coming in and that competing distributor is bringing in better quality product, I'm hoping that means companies like your Marvel Comics are going to be forced to eventually deal with them going out here and getting rid of this woke trash, because again, if you want that access to those bigger retailers, then you're going to have to change your product and make your product the highest quality. So if DC Comics, again, leaving Diamond, a lot of comic fans and a lot of comic shops are upset now because they have to deal with a second distributor. But if that second distributor is bringing in the asset of returnability, that asset is going to allow access to those larger stores and possibly lead to a return to comics at retail in the long term. And that's the ultimate goal that I see as what everybody needs to work towards, because the industry has been in such a bad slump for the last 25 years that it's time that we started moving in a new direction. And while some people will be upset, and some comic shop owners are upset, and some fans are upset, I see this as, again, a good move, because when it comes down to comics, at least now we have DC trying to get comics back in the hands of readers, and DC finally making an effort to deal with the almost 15 years of failure and look to change its direction so that they can take the industry back to the next level and finally start profiting on all of the success of these superhero movies at the comic shop and bring those readers from the movies to the comic shop. If you want to try some of my SJS Direct publications, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, you may pick them all up on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle formats. You can also find many of my titles on Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. And if you want to see me make more videos about comics and the comic book industry, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, John Haynes, the man with nothing to lose. The man who rules the world runs into the irresistible force of a man with nothing to lose in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get the regular and variant editions of John Haynes, the man